As it cooks, it will thicken, just as like when you're using flour to make a sauce for in cookery, you know, it takes some time as the water, as it heats up. I mean, starch dissolves above 50 degrees Celsius. So at the moment, I mean, I can tell you from sticking my finger in it, it's only about 40. So it takes a little time. As it starts to cook, then the glue will thicken. Why do we need to cook it so long? Well, there's a number of reasons. Because if I just brought this to the boil and then we just set it aside, it would still stick. But the thing is, what we're going to do is also use this paste for lining paper, so we're going to add quite a lot of water to it. And the reason we're going to do that is to keep it flexible. Because we don't want, if we're repairing something, we don't want our manuscript or our textile or whatever we're back using the adhesive for, we don't want it to be too thick, and because otherwise it will, it's an undesirable thing. And thicker and stronger isn't necessarily better. You know, when you've got something that's very weak and perhaps very lightweight paper, it's actually better to repair it with something that is a fairly lightweight tissue of some sort and a fairly dilute adhesive. You can see that actually, I think I need to turn it down a little bit. Already it's starting to get lumps in the bottom, so I must pay attention and concentrate on it. Yes.
It's called laughing as well.
You can see, can you see it's getting a bit lumpy? That's partly because I've not been paying properly attention to it. But it means you do have to keep stirring it. I can feel it's just sticking slightly on the bottom. So I'm keeping stirring it, and the lumps will go from it, but you do have to keep at it. Okay, can you see how much it's thickened? Somebody else come. Yeah, you have a go. Keep stirring. Right, I'll stir. All right, you stir. Just take it so you can see that it is really quite thick, and you can just feel a bit conscious sticking on the bottom. So you need to keep stirring it.
It smells good.
Yeah, no, it's probably quite good to eat, but if it's getting too thick, you can. Sorry. You can dilute it a little bit, okay, as you go along, because it's important to be able, so it doesn't stick on the bottom. So I'm just going to, again, slowly, just a small amount, okay? Small amount at a time. Don't be tempted to add too much, because we want to keep it, we don't want to put too much water in, but we do need to be able to stir it.
So it is necessary you have to heat it up.
Yes. You can't use it.
Why if we don't heat it up, what is the difference?
Well, it won't. In order to get starch to go into solution, it needs to be above 50 degrees Celsius. So unless you heat it up, it won't have any adhesive properties.
Okay. So the property will appear.
Yeah.
Heating up.
Yes, you need to heat it up. You need to cook it. Can I have it? Let me have a quick feel. See how we're coming on. So it's really getting quite thick, but this is good, and you can see it's got this kind of milky, creamy consistency. So yeah, keep stirring. What you need to do for the paste to be good for what we need to use it for, it actually needs to come to the boil. So as we're doing this, just stop. Can you see where it's bubbling like that? That's what we want, because it needs to be hot enough. If you don't get it hot enough, when you start to dilute it, when you're using it as an adhesive, it will lose its strength. Okay, so keep stir. Everybody have a stir. Now the length of time you're going to cook it will depend on the starch. For this purpose of the demonstration, I'm just going to cook it we'll cook it for 20 minutes only, and then we're going to let it cool, and then we'll sieve it later on today when we want to use it as an adhesive. So it's...
Can you add sugar also?
If you wanted to make a really good, and butter maybe. How is it? Does it feel like it's sticking on the bottom a little bit? Let me have a. Okay, look it go. So yeah, no, you just. What I want to get across is just the fact that you do need to cook it for quite a long time, and also in terms of the insecticidal properties of it. If you cook it for long enough as well, it is less attractive to insects. So as a guideline, once it comes to the boil like this, we'd say 20 minutes, stirring all the time. Okay.
So is there a change of color we can notice? A bit of pink, pinkish.
Sorry?
It's getting
Color
a
is
bit
changing.
pinkish.
It's getting it. Well, that's very strange. I certainly can't explain that, but it will change in consistency. It will change. It may be. You just want to make sure it hasn't burnt. There's no burning on the bottom. So
Maybe because of this spatula.
it could be actually. Yeah, could be. Slightly worrying. That's not very desirable. Yes, it may be that's the case, yeah. Oh dear. We haven't got a ordinary wooden spoon, have we? Yeah, except it's got something colour in it. Okay. Let's change over from this. Get rid of that. Yeah, that's okay. Okay. Yeah, that's better. Yeah, generally I think if you can get a spoon, get a wooden spoon that hasn't got any treatment on it. So we're going to use this. I can feel it's getting quite a little bit thick, so let's just we're going to add a small amount more water. And you may need to do this as you cook. Okay, I'll hand back to you. You're the expert. One of the reasons that you need to also to keep stirring it is you need to introduce air. So can everybody see that it is actually really hot? So that is important that you get that it's actually boiling, but at the same time you just got to keep stirring it because you need to introduce air into it, and this is part of the process of developing the adhesive of it, okay? I've seen people make paste, they have in a double boiler, but actually the problem with that is it doesn't get hot enough. It's important to make it directly on the heat. Doesn't go. So does anyone else have a stir? Somebody will like to have a stir. Okay, thanks. Yeah. So the other thing is what we need to do when we've finished cooking the paste, we're going to let it cool and it'll then solidify. I mean, it will become like a jelly. And then once it's cooled and solidified, then we're going to put it through the sieve and we're going to add water to it. And it depends on the dilution, depends on what you're doing with it. What we're going to do first of all is just do some small repairs. And for that, I usually just put the solidified paste just through the sieve a couple of times to make it a bit smoother and more mobile. But for lining things and backing things, we're going to use it much, much thinner than that. More like milk, thin cream consistency. So has anyone not had a go at something you just see how thick it is? Come and have a stir. Somebody missing. You're a cook. You appreciate it. Yeah, check the consistency. Yeah. So when you're making, in cookery, when you're making a flour-based sauce, you need to cook the flour out because otherwise you get that not a very nice flavour. And just with that, even with wheat starch, you need to cook it well. So we've done about 10 minutes so far. Maybe somebody can set a timer for another 10 minutes. That should be fine. So with your preparation that you made this morning with Anupam, we're going to cook it for at least 20 minutes. That's just simply because I haven't made paste that way very many times, so I bow to his understanding. He reckons more like half an hour to 40 minutes for cooking the paste that you make, directly from the wheat flour. Okay, I think now people have seen the process.
Yeah.
I think maybe we can take a break.
Yeah.
What we're going to do, we've nearly finished the cooking time. I'll carry on stirring. I think we take a break, have some tea for 15 minutes or so, and then we've got another activity. We're going to go off and look at the museum and some other stuff. So let's take a break now. I'm going to stay with this.
So, and actually, when you heat this up, you mean it need to take 20 minutes?
20 minutes, yeah.
Okay.
Boil for 20 minutes.
Okay.
If we cook gluten-free powder starch for 20 minutes, how long should we cook this?
I think a bit longer for that, according to Anupam. Yeah, maybe half an hour, 20 minutes to half an hour.
This kind of consistency? Until we reach this kind of consistency?
Yeah, we'll see, because I haven't cooked this way myself very often. So we will see this afternoon. I think it will also thicken.
Yeah.
But I'm less familiar with that process, so it'll be a learning process for me also how to do it. Yeah, if you need to add more water to it, if it becomes too thick, that's fine, you can do that. Just a little bit at a time. It's the same way, if you're making in cookery, if you put too much too much lemon juice or lime juice in, it can curdle it. The same thing with the paste. So small amount at a time, and then you can adjust the consistency. How are we doing? We're still okay? You can see that the consistency, it's gone from, if you ignore the slight coloration from the spoon, but you can see it's changed from a sort of milky white to more of a kind of a more opalescent thing, and that's the point when you know that you're getting to the right consistency of the cooking. So is that clear that when the paste changes slightly from a kind of milky appearance to a more opalescent appearance, that's when it's beginning to get the right properties? Yeah, it becomes harder because the water evaporates obviously as you're cooking it, yeah. So do you do any cooking? Are you a cook?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you appreciate it's like a sauce. You make a very good sauce. You have to stir all the time, and that keeps the gloss. And with the paste, it's the same. When you get that nice glossy appearance, that's when you know that you're doing the right thing. Yeah. Okay. Somebody was also asking, this is a ready-made paste that you can buy it's actually I think it's made in Korea. You can buy this Yamato paste. This is also wheat starch and rice starch, I think, actually. And this is better because you know exactly what's in there. And this is just useful from time to time if you have to need a very small amount of paste. But Yamato. It's rice starch, I think. Is that right, Anne? It's rice starch, isn't it? Okay. He's going to have a go. Okay, you do some stirring. Good. Well done. 3 minutes to go. Yeah.
Stirring, which affects the paste, right?
It helps to introduce air into the paste, and Some people use double boiler to make paste, but honestly it's very difficult to stir it vigorously enough, and that's very important to do that. It's very good. It's good. Yeah, that's good. Just check, everyone, just stop for a second and just check to see, yeah, it's still boiling away, that's good.
What's the consistency that we, the desired consistency?
When you're cooking it like this, if you're cooking 1 to 3, which is what we're doing, so 1 part dry powder to 3 parts of water, then you'll end up with something about this consistency. So it'd be quite difficult. It gets difficult to stir. But if you need to cook it, sometimes you need to cook it for even longer, in which case you can use, you can add a little bit of water to it. We have done that as we've been going on, so it's probably more like 1 to 4 actually. Yeah, but yeah, be careful. But you'll see if it will stick to your fingers. Like it, yeah, it's getting there.
1 cup of
Dry powder, 3 to 4. Yeah, that's good. Okay, good. Thank you. That's fine. Right. What I'm going to do, it's been cooked long enough. I can feel it's just starting to catch on the bottom. So I'm going to put it into a clean. I'm going to decant it now into. It can be a clean bowl, another saucepan, whatever you've got, but just as long as it's clean. And put that. And put. Okay, so we can put that. We can put some just cold. We put some cold water. Turn that off. Okay. So yeah, just put a little bit of cold water in so it doesn't. Yeah, that's right. That'll be all right. Just stop it.
Can we do do we have to do this in a stew, or we can do it in like other utensils?
In a stainless steel pan is better, maybe, or the problem is if you use a copper pan or something like that, you can get metal. There will be maybe metal particles in the paste, so it's better to use a stainless steel pan, albeit one with a copper bottom. So okay, now you've got the paste here. We can't use this in this thing. What we're going to do is we're going to pour a little bit of water, not directly on it, just on the side there, so it covers. I know this is rather wasteful of bottled water, but I'm just going to do it so that it's covered. I need a little bit more actually if we've got another bottle of water. The reason we're doing this is because if I don't do this, it'll form a very tough skin on the paste, and then when you come to, we're going to sieve it when it's cooled, and it's really difficult to sieve it if it was a very tough skin, so you end up wasting it. So, and you can use tap water for this. You don't need to use, as long as it's clean water, you can use clean water to do that. And we're just going to leave that now to solidify. So if you would need to make paste, you need to make it maybe like an hour before, at least before you need to use it. But you can then just, if you cover it with cold water, it will set properly, and then the next stage will be to sieve it and dilute it. So we're going to do that later on. So we're going to take a break now. So have a tea break now. And we've got
the durability of this starch.
The what?
How long can we use?
Well, it depends on the temperature. Like if you're using it, it's very hot, maybe only a couple of days. So it's best just to make as much as you need for that day or the next 2 days, but not more, just to make it fresh.
In a place like Dharamsala,
Yeah, in here it's probably not so bad because the temperature is not like, 40, 50. It's like in the 20s. So maybe it'll last 3 or 4 days. If you cover it, the other thing is, which you haven't got here, just a piece of some cotton cloth, a bit of water, just cover it, just damp cloth, just a cotton sheet or anything like that, or just to cover it, to stop dirt falling in it and insects getting in it, and also it helps just to stop it, mold formation and so on.
where should we store it, sir? In refrigerator or in room temperature?
It's a good question. in a lot of people store it in the fridge, and the problem with that is that if you are diluting it a long way, like when you're doing a lining, the problem with that is that it changes the properties slightly. And I can't explain it because it's, I don't understand the complexities of the chemistry. But what happens is the crystalline structure of the paste changes slightly, and therefore it becomes a little bit weaker. So I think it's better just make it and then cover it. And just, if there's any doubt about it after 2 or 3 days, then, throw it away, make some fresh. Yeah. Okay, so, yeah.
How long should we keep it aside for?
Well, before we use it, we need at least an hour, I think. If you cover it with cold water, leave it for an hour minimum. Because it needs to set into a jelly form. If you try and use it in this form while it's still hot, it won't work properly.
So we need to cool it down.
Cool it down,
Oh.
yeah. And that takes, you can probably, if you need to use something in a hurry, if you've got a small amount of paste, you put some cold water on it, maybe in 15 minutes it will be ready. But for a large amount, like minimum, leave it for an hour.
Okay, so it's okay if I just use refrigerated water?
Yes, you don't need to. We used some of this water because it was convenient to show you, but you don't need to. If you've got clean source of clean.
The temperature of the water does not matter. As long as we
No,
keep
just
it
room temperature water is fine.
Okay.
Like from
Even
the tap.
refrigerated water is fine.
Yeah, you can put refrigerated water in it probably, but it's not necessary. Just use cold water from the tap is fine.
Okay, so
That's
the
good.
purpose is to cool the cooked
Yeah, so it's not going to be incorporated in the paste. We'll throw it away when it's cooled.
One more question. When we use 6 liters of water,
Yeah.
how much water?
Yeah, it's one part of dry powder to 3 parts of water.
Okay, that
1 to 3.
That means there's a 6 cup of water, that means there's 2 cup of flour.
Yes, that's right. 6 cups of water and 2 cups of dry, so it's 1 to 3. 1 to 3. But you can vary it. We added some more water to it. If when you're cooking it, you find it's getting too thick, you can add a little bit of time. Yeah, that's depends on whether you've got a clean supply of water. You can use if your tap water is clean. You can use that. I'm suggesting that you can also, or mineral water, yes. Yeah. What I was suggesting is if you have any doubts about your tap water, you can just use a water filter, that you use for drinking water. Just use one of those. Yeah, just filtered. Well, I don't. It may make some difference, but a very subtle difference to the paste. Yeah, the main thing is the principle is just use clean water, and if you're in doubt about it, This I use this sometimes for making up solutions of things because, as it's distilled water, there's no bacteria. There's no. It's very pure, the water, but it's not necessary for the paste. It's not that critical, to be honest. It's not very nice because it's had all the calcium and all the fluoride, everything contained. So it has a very odd taste. Most tap water is slightly alkaline because of calcium and other stuff, and this is often like neutral or slightly on the acid side, slightly acidic. So I think you wouldn't want to drink it probably. It's not very nice.
Health-wise, it's okay. Health-wise, is it okay?
No, you won't come to any harm from drinking distilled water.
Because we have only used it for batteries and inverters. Never thought of it as drinkable.
Well, the reason that you buy this for batteries is because batteries, they obviously, you don't want calcium getting in your battery water because the battery needs, again, the electrolyte in the battery needs to be slightly acid. So that's why you use this, because it's neutral or slightly. When I say acid, very slightly acid. Very not dangerously acid at all. Morning, and as you can see, it's set hard. It's like a jelly. So that's the condition you want it in. You need this, ideally, I mean this has been in cold water for a couple of hours, so it's fine. I know that it's set completely. If you try and use the paste, you know, like as soon as we've made it, it will be very difficult and it just will not mix properly. And what we need to do now is, now that it's set like this, is to sieve it, and then we're going to dilute it. So you can just see there, I mean, I think you can see now, haven't you, that it's like, it's a set like a kind of a, you know,
Jelly.
a jelly sort of thing, children's party jelly. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm just going to push it through the sieve. Ideally use a spatula that hasn't been painted in anything, but you do need something fairly strong, because what we're going to do is push it, use the spatula, just push it through the sieve like that. Now this is a metal sieve. This is like a chemistry one, but you could use any, you can also use a horsehair sieve. In Japan they use a horsehair sieve, but the metal sieve is quite good. And you can see there where it's come through. So what we're going to do is we're just going to sieve it a few times, pass it through the sieve a few times. As you sieve it, it breaks the paste up, and it also makes it a bit easier to brush it out, because I'm going to do 2 lots of paste. I'm going to do this first lot here, which is just really for, this is the consistency that we're going to use to do some local repairs, okay? Now this is quite strong, but what we're going to do is to take the paste and then we're going to brush it out very thinly, and then we're going to apply it to our paper. What I thought would be good is to just have a look at the sort of paper we're talking about for doing some basic repairs on your manuscripts. These Japanese papers, you can see it's quite thin, it's quite transparent, like that. Now, the advantage of this sort of paper is that you can tear it and you can shape it quite accurately, and also it's got, can you see how long the fibres are on the edge? So it means that it'll make quite a good strong repair without the need for too much adhesive. And you can either, we can have this is a torn edge like that, so you've got the long fibres, or you can also have a cut edge, which is obviously a much sharper edge, or we can also have a combination of the two, which quite often when I'm doing little repairs I use. So this is a kind of thin to medium weight Japanese paper. Sometimes we'll use thinner, so that's that one. I mean, have a look at that. There's also thinner stuff here. This is a Tengujo paper, which again is a Japanese paper. Can you see how lightweight that is, just to get a feel for it? And then there's, you know, also here we've got some samples. This is some thicker stuff. So this is probably better for, you know, perhaps larger things, things on a heavyweight paper, but that's like that. This is, well, that's a Tengujo paper, the thin one. This is a Kozo paper. It's probably something like a Kozo-shi, which is a Japanese medium weight, long fibered paper. But the Tengujo paper is also made from Kozo fibers, but it's much finer, much finer. So it's like a tissue, really. So that's the adhesive. It's been through the sieve a couple of times. I'm going to use a flat paintbrush to actually apply that to my Japanese paper in order to do a repair. I'm just going to show you different ways of tearing the paper, because as this is very long fibred, you can see it's got a grain direction, so it's got lines going top to bottom. So what we're going to do is we're going to use we're going to make our strips we're going to do our repairs with the fibres going top to bottom. Okay, so we're going to, yeah. So I'm going to let's put that to one side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just add this. This is a fairly medium weight paper, so it's not terribly thin. But what I'm going to do first of all is I'm just going to use this as needle. I'm just going to literally just score the surface of the paper like that, but without cutting through it. I can then pull it apart like that. And what you'd get then is you get like a combination. You need to pass it around to see it's got some long fibres and some just short cut edges. So I'll do that. I'll just do it again just to show you that. I mean, if you want to make really thin strips, if you're just repairing tears, then you can do the same thing. And again, then you've got a nice strip of paper. So it's got a slightly uneven edge, and the reason for that is just that it will stick a lot better with less adhesive. Okay, so because it grips on, the fibres just grip onto the surface of your manuscript or whatever it is, so if you're repairing a tear. So I'm going to paste this. You can paste it directly on the table. You can use a piece of Melanex. You could use a wooden board, which I sometimes just a little piece of wood to paste up on. And, you know, size of brush depends on how much paste you're applying. But what we're going to do is use quite a small amount of adhesive. So I'm working, you can see you can work the adhesive a little bit in the bottom of the saucepan. I'm actually going to, let's transfer it to here. This will be easier for people to see. So you can see it is quite stiff. So I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to use a slightly bigger brush just to work it a little bit on the surface here. But we're not going to, when we come to apply the paste, we're not going to apply a lot of paste. We're going to apply quite a minimal amount, and then we're going to remove quite a lot of it. So, see that I've got a dark surface. I'm going to use my mobile phone case because it'll be easier for you to see what we're talking about. I'm not suggesting you use your mobile phones, but you can use any. It's good actually to have a slightly dark surface. So I've got my paste like that and apply it. Okay, just you do need to apply it quite. This is quite strong. The good thing, the reason using the Japanese paper is also when it's got paste on it, it's still quite reasonably strong, and I can just feel with my finger there that we've got a good, nice, even layer of paste. So I'm going to actually just remove some of it with my finger because I don't want lots of paste. And if we're going to do a repair on a manuscript, you may find that there's some water-soluble elements in it, so you don't want to get it wet. You just want it just so that it's sticky and tacky. So that feels good. It feels like it's got some strength. Now, we'll do a repair on an actual manuscript, but for the time being, I'm just showing you some principles of it, so you can imagine. So you can then lift it up, and then you can put it onto your. We'll have to imagine something that has a tear in it. Let me find a piece of paper. Let's see. Has somebody got a piece of file paper? Is fine. Just make a tear in it, and that's fine. Okay. So you can imagine here we have a nice clean area working in, and we've got tear in the paper like that. You can see the way the paper's torn, haven't you? You can see that it's sort of delaminated on there. So I'm going to do two things. First of all, I'm going to put that back down. I'm going to apply a very small amount of paste actually to this torn edge. I don't know if you can see that. Sorry, it's rather difficult at the back, but you can see where it's kind of delaminated. So I'm going to apply a very, very thin amount of paste, first of all, to that area there. And then I'm going to close that up. I'm just going to very lightly just rub it. If you haven't, this is a Teflon spatula. You can use a bone folder, or you can use your fingernail also. Can do them. These are various ones. These are made of bone. Okay. So there it is. What I've done is I've just closed the gap up with some paste directly, and I'm now on the back side. Imagine that's the front side. So I'm going to turn it over, and I'll put a reinforcing strip actually on the back. of where I've been. So I'm just testing that to see whether it's still moist. I'm going to actually put I think it's getting a bit dry, so I'll just put a little bit more paste on. Can you see where the paper, where it's gone slightly more transparent where I'm pasting it? Let's see. It's folded over on itself, but here you go. Okay. Sometimes you just put it on the back of your hand. You can tell if it's the right sort of wetness or not. You don't want, as I say, you don't want really, really wet paste. And then you can position it, just get it in the right place, overlap. And then you can just smooth it down like that. Now ideally, once you've done your repair, you need to leave it under a weight of some sort. So normally we have some blotting paper underneath here. I can do it. Let's have a sheet of the blotter over here. Let's do it. I'll move round. So, and then we'll put a weight on top of that. Just have to be careful that if there's any adhesive on the underside, that you don't stick it to whatever the blotter is. So. Have you got any pieces of blotter or anything small bits?
We can
Just it says
small scissors. And you can cut the bondina as well.
Mm-hmm. So what we're going to do is going to put some blotting paper on the back side. I'm sorry, I'm doing this rather quickly just to show you. And we're also going to use, this is bondina. This is it's a smooth, very smooth surface. It's like a release paper. And the reason for using that is just so that if there's any seepage of adhesive through here, it won't stick to the blotting paper. So I'm going to have one underneath with a piece, a scrap of blot underneath the blotter. Then I'm going to put another piece here on top, and then I'm going to just double this over. Actually, just a double layer of the two on there, and then I'm going to put a small weight on top. This is my pocketbook. This just happens to be handy, so just imagine that this is a piece of glass, maybe a small piece of marble or weight, something like that, just something to hold it. Okay. So you were imagining a glass plate on here, but it's actually my notebook. So what I wanted to get across is the fact that you don't need to use very much adhesive. You can work on something that's quite moisture sensitive because you're really going to use very, very little moisture when you do it. The paper I used is quite thick actually. I mean, this is much more like the sort of thickness we'd use. So you can see it's a bit thicker than a tissue paper, but it's not very heavyweight. So you can put that on the back of something and it won't interfere with the flexing. You'll be able to flex the paper quite easily, and it will remain quite flexible. Sometimes I'm going to use this other paper here. Sometimes you may want to have a repair where you have longer fibres from the repair, and if you do that, then you can also just use a brush. I'm just going to use some water from here. And you can use a ruler, and then you can do what they call a water cut. But what I'm going to do first, before doing that, is I'm going to go for quite a thin strip again, because I'm just going to do a little strip repair. I'll use either the bone folder or the Teflon folder like that, just to make a slight groove in the surface of the paper. And then I'm going to use the water like that. You can use a bigger brush than this, but it's just so that you get a line there. Can you see where it's gone a bit more transparent on the surface there than on there? So when I
put it against the light.
I will, yes. It's difficult. Can you see where there's a line there of water? So when I come to tear this, I can just, very carefully, I can tear along this line. And then you can see that you get a much more fibrous, you get a much longer fibres along the edge like that. And again, that's sometimes quite good because you can use a very, very dilute paste and it will stick. And this is very useful sometimes when you're trying to just reinforce an edge of a damaged document or something where you need a nice uneven line, because then it doesn't show so much. You know, if you have a cut line, sometimes it's very obvious. Now these papers, the ones we've got, they're different colours. This one has actually been toned with some watercolour, and some of the other ones are just untoned ones. So you can see they're different colours. So this is just to let you know that if you're repairing a manuscript page and it's very yellowed or discoloured, and if you put a white, if you have to put a white reinforcing strip of paper, it's going to show. So sometimes you can actually tone the paper. And this is just with watercolour paint, nothing else.
Can you use tea bag instead?
Well, the problem with tea bag stuff is that it's possible if it gets wet, it's going to leach out into the paper. I do use, sometimes you can use tea to tone paper, but the problem is then watercolour contains gum, so that when it gets wet, it's got a little bit of resistance. The problem with something like tea is if it gets wet, then it'll leach in and then it can stain your document. So I think it's better probably, mostly it's better to use that watercolour, very dilute. You can see it's this yellow ochre watercolour and probably with a bit of black or something added. So it's very, very dilute. But it just means that you've not got to start white and repair.
Mike, what do you think about using acrylic?
Acrylic paint can be fine, sometimes, particularly for tankers, sometimes when you've got a large area, very opaque paint, sometimes acrylic is acceptable as well. It gives you it's much stronger colour, so that if you're on a border or something where you need a very strong colour, then acrylic is probably a good choice as well. But if you do use both watercolour or you use acrylic, buy good quality ones, don't buy the cheapest ones, buy good quality, artist quality ones. Because you also, with your repairs, the watercolour you use, you don't want that to fade. So if you stick to using some good quality watercolours, then that will do the trick. Okay, so we've left this one. We've got the bondina on the bottom, we've got the bondina on the top, we've got some blotting paper here. I did it with this toned paper just to show, because it shows up better. But you probably wouldn't. Normally you'd use, this is a white paper, so you'd use a light coloured tissue and an uncoloured tissue. Okay, so this is just because it shows up and it's easy for everyone to see. The next question is, here we have some very nice thin, look at that, that's a really nice thin tissue. See?
This is paper?
It is paper. Japan, yeah. Now, for some purposes, Nepalese paper is also, I've used Nepalese paper for doing repairs, but the quality, it depends on the quality of the paper. And this is the problem, is the consistency of the quality. So sometimes, some of these papers, it's a little bit, the Japanese papers, the consistency is very good from one batch to another, so it's much easier to tell. So let's try pasting up one of these. Let's imagine we have, on this piece of white file paper, imagine we have a thin area where it's got damaged. So now I'm going to use a much thinner tissue, and when it comes to pasting it out, again, you just have to be quite careful when you paste it out, because this is more fragile. So what I do, do it quite gently, a little bit at a time, working from the kind of centre and working outwards, and you can see I'm going to then, with my finger, you see I'm taking quite a lot of the paste off, so that when you have the repair, I mean you can see that it's not too wet, is it? It's just like tacky. So yeah, just feel. It's quite good. I quite often, if I'm pasting something out, I just do it on my finger or on my fingernail sometimes. I have to say fingernails also very useful, just for, unfortunately I've lost this one. Your thumbnail is very good, because you can paste out a very small amount. And then when it comes to positioning it, sometimes it's easy to see where you want to have your repair, but then there are other times when you've got thinned areas where you may want to use a light box or something underneath. So you can use a light from a mobile phone underneath if you're really, if you're trying to. I'll just demonstrate that. Like a light table.
Yeah.
Put a glass on your light.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, so you can see, can't you, from underneath? It's a way. So if I wanted to find a thinned area, and I need there, then I can use a light underneath. And if you haven't got a light table, then you can use your mobile phone, like I am, to position your piece of tissue. Okay. When you put it down, it's quite fragile. So again, you've got these long fibres. Sometimes you may decide that it's better, rather than to have a torn edge, you may want to go for using the awl, just to make a very light incision on the surface, and then you can tear it away like that. And sometimes, occasionally, you may actually decide it's better to have a straight edge or a cut edge, but that will vary a little bit from one to another. So I'm going to do the same thing. There you are. I'm going to put, it's this blotter, I'm going to put the bondina underneath, and then I'm going to put another piece of bondina. Thank you. Bondina there. Put another piece of bondina on top, and then my blotter, and then again I'm going to leave it. I'm going to put a weight, glass weight, my notebook on top like that. And usually, if you're working on a document or a manuscript, something like that, you've got a lot of tears, then you can work round. So you start on one edge and just work round logically around the whole edge. Don't forget, if you've got a tear and it's sort of it's not just a straight cut, but it's like at an angle, then you just need to apply a little bit of paste just down the break edge first, close that up, then put your pasted Japanese paper, and you can see this has actually been toned slightly, so it's not stark white, it's like a kind of yellowy colour. So that's quite good for sort of old paper. It just shows up less and looks a little bit nicer and a little bit neater.
So in case if we do not have the bundle, can we use Melanex instead?
The trouble with Melanex is that it doesn't allow the moisture to evaporate, so you need something. I mean, actually, if you are working in the field and you have nothing else, if you've just got some scraps of clean cotton cloth, put it on top of that, and that will allow the moisture to evaporate, but it also, so that it doesn't stick to it, because that's the main thing. So with that, but no, there are other things. There's also like glassine paper and like butter paper as well, which I think is available. Like bakery paper. That's so much, or silicon paper, coated paper, something like that. But you want to leave, even if you're doing a repair like that on quite a small area, then if you can leave it under weight, probably for half an hour or something, it's enough for it to dry out properly. because if you don't do that, sometimes the paper, you can get distortion in the paper. So that's just doing local repairs. I think for the moment, for today, we're going to stick with doing some examples of doing some local repairs, and I think it'd be quite nice if everybody has a go. You can sieve some of the paste and take it to your table.
Gone down to get some manuscripts.
Yeah.
That would be for later on, I think.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Mike might demonstrate it.
Yeah. Well, what we'll do is we'll if you've got some things that we can work on, I think it's good for everyone to actually work on real things. So because we start from right now. Maybe we can do that next. So what I'm going to ask you to do is each person take probably no more than a tablespoon of that and sieve it, just like I did it, and then put it into one of your little bowls and take it back to your table, and then we'll get you all organised to have some practice to doing some tear repairs. Okay, there's quite a few brushes, there's everything you need here, so if you want to just do that one by one and just so what I suggest, take the bowl and just you're going to need very little paste, so no more than that each, okay? Okay. And then we'll have enough for everybody. So off you go. And you can use that to push it through the sieve. Go push it through a couple of times. But yeah, stick to that kind of quantity, that'll be fine. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, just sort of stroke it through, a bit like if you were applying butter to bread. That just breaks the paste up. Also, if there's any lumps in it or anything, it takes any lumps out. I mean, there aren't any lumps because we cooked it well. But it's just sorry? Oh, what, the sieve? Well, no, not really. I mean, the finer, obviously, it takes longer. Maybe we better stick to using this. Okay. I would do it just as a matter of principle, put it through a couple of times, like that, and then use the back of the spoon, just push it through like that.